All right, in just a few hours from now, we expect to hear from the Justice Department about the expected indictment of Raúl Castro. The 94-year-old former president of Cuba is no longer in power, but there are growing concerns about how other nations might react if the U.S. tries to extract Castro from Cuban soil. William LeoGrande is a professor of government at American University. He joins us now to discuss why this is all happening at the moment. Good morning to you and welcome, Professor. Raúl Castro will turn 95 in a couple weeks. Why, in your view, is this U.S. indictment of Castro necessary at this moment, according to the U.S., do you think?
Well, I think it's part of the broader pressure campaign that the Trump administration has been waging against Cuba really since the beginning of the year, when they seized the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro. This is clearly an analogous kind of situation. And I think it's a warning to the Cuban government, who we're having negotiations with, that they'd better give in to U.S. terms, or else we're coming for Raúl Castro, the historic leader of the Cuban Revolution.
And Professor, do you think that it's inevitable that Raúl Castro, I don't think he's going to turn himself in anywhere. So do you think it's inevitable that the U.S. will send some kind of, will start some kind of operation to extract him?
I think it's certainly a possibility. President Trump has been hinting at military action against Cuba for a number of weeks now. Of course, our military assets are currently deployed in Iran, so it's not something that's likely to happen in the immediate future. But the effort clearly on the part of this administration is to change the government of Cuba. And this is, as I say, just one more part of a rising tide of pressure on the island, from cutting off Venezuelan oil, imposing a general oil blockade, threatening sanctions against other countries that send oil to Cuba, and finally, just recently, on May 1st, threatening sanctions against foreign companies that do business with Cuba at all.
And what fascinates me is it's been decades that the U.S. has been trying to isolate Cuba in so many different ways and through different policies, but the government exists and persists in its state. Fidel Castro died a decade ago. Like I said, Raúl Castro is almost 100 years old. What is the motivation for the U.S. to add to this pressure campaign now? Is it because they feel this regime is on its last legs? Isn't there also a risk to opening this door?
Well, certainly the Cuban government is probably weaker today than it has been historically. The economy is in bad shape. It's never really fully recovered from the COVID pandemic. And we have a Secretary of State who is of Cuban-American heritage and who identifies with the constituency in South Florida that has been pressing for the United States to overthrow the Cuban government ever since 1959.
And Professor, why do this? What type of risk does Cuba pose to us?
Well, of course, they're claiming that it's a threat because it has a good relationship with Russia and China, who the administration sees as extra hemispheric powers, and they shouldn't have a presence in our hemisphere, according to the Don Roe doctrine. But Cuba doesn't really pose a military threat to the United States. They've been reduced to a kind of territorial defense force because of the lack of fuel, the lack of equipment. They're still operating with Soviet-level equipment from 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
And Professor, what could the diplomatic fallout be? Because, like you mentioned, Cuba is aligned with Russia, with China, and I think a lot of other countries would view, a Maduro-like operation as not legal.
Well, I think that's right. And the risk is that other countries draw the parallel between Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the United States, a military attack on Cuba. Cuba has a lot of friends around the world, particularly in Africa, and some important friends still in Latin America, like Mexico and Brazil. So the United States will pay a diplomatic cost with our allies if it does this.
Professor William LeoGrande, thank you so much as we look at footage there of Russian President Vladimir Putin meeting with Xi Jinping this week, speaking about those counterpowers to the U.S. Professor, thank you.